Welcome, champions, to the next overview and tier list ranking, featuring the newest champion, or the most recent reworked champion. This is where we'll rank them in my overall tier list for every champion in the game, and where I break down their mechanics. And you know it by now if you've been watching. I've got to shout out my Twitch where I cover the champion the same day I release the video. Come on in and say hi to my cat, you can ignore me. This time around it's not only a new champion, but a whole new race we haven't seen before. Through Kalix, the lawful evil thri-kreen ranger in Seed 5. He a bug man. He serves the formation exclusively as a support. His basic attack is a ranged attack, where he throws a chatikcha at the closest enemy, dealing one hit. His ultimate is also ranged, having Kalix make 5 attacks against random enemies, dealing ultimate damage and stunning them for 5 seconds due to his paralyzing poison. Regardless of anything else I talk about with this champion, he is a must-get for one reason: his passive ability, thri-kreen telepathy. While Kalix is in the front column of any party, your active party's damage is increased by 100%, scaling with gear. This means his ability affects your active party even if Kalix is not your active party, as long as Kalix is in the front column of whatever party he's in. So even if you don't like Kalix, or don't like the fact he's in Seed 5 because there's Valentine, you can throw him in a background party, and as long as he's in that front column of his party, you will get a damage buff for your main party. Now on to his other formation abilities. For starters, he has Mind Link, where Kalix telepathically increases the damage of all champions not adjacent to him. So think Makos with this one. He also has Unorthodox Alliance, where Kalix gains an ally stack for each champion in the formation that is not a standard species. He increases the effective Mind Link by 100% for each ally stack, stacking multiplicatively, and yes, this does scale with the pre-stack of the equipment. Standard species are Aasimar, Dragonborn, Dwarf, Elf, Gnome, Goliath, Halfling, Human, Orc, Tiefling, Half-Orc, and Half-Elf. Interesting how they specify Orc. Then Kalix also has Chameleon Carapace. Enemies that attempt to choose Kalix as a target do not, and instead choose to attack another champion, assuming another valid target exists. The effective Mind Link is increased by 100% each time this triggers, stacking multiplicatively up to 25 times, and resetting when you change areas. This is akin to Turiel or Gale with the right specialization choice, and that he's a bit of a tank but kinda not, which is why he only has the support role, not the tank role. And lastly, he has the Deadliest Prey. Humanoids are Kalix's favorite foe. All champions deal 400% additional damage against Kalix's favorite foes. You have one choice between 3 options with his specializations. For starters, we have Strength in Numbers. The most represented species in your formation grant additional ally stacks for Unorthodox Alliance, even if it is not a standard species. Which means you're going to either get more stacks for his pre-stack, or if you're slotting a bunch of standard species, you'll be able to make them count for it instead. In the case of a tie, champions from all species grant additional ally stacks. Creative Camouflage doubles the stacks of Chameleon Carapace, and 50% of the current stacks are not reset when you change areas. Then he has One for You, One for Me. Kalix gains the speed roll, and each time a monster spawns that is not his favored foe, one or more favored foes simultaneously spawn. The effect of the Deadliest Prey is also increased. His equipment is overall pretty good. One for global damage, one for thri-kreen telepathy, one for Mind Link, one for Unorthodox Alliance, which again is his pre-stack, one for Chameleon Carapace, and of course, ultimate cooldown. His feats are actually quite interesting. Obviously, he has the standard all damage increases and formation ability increases. And of course, you want to be on the lookout for Unorthodox Alliance as that scales his pre-stack. But then he is a bit like Esmeralda, in that he has additional favored foes he can slot through his feats. And this is important for a few reasons. For one, via his specialization, one for you, one for me, he will force spawn his favored foes. And through feats, he can spawn some rather unique ones we haven't seen yet, like force spawning Celestials and Oozes, which can be quite important if you're trying to stack up someone like Vin Ursa, who can pre-stackatively stack for every unique race you encounter. His achievement isn't too bad, requiring you to complete 5,000 areas with 10 or more of his ally stacks from his unorthodox alliance. Just stack that up and get to pushing. In his first variant, he will be able to be moved but not removed, and only champions who are not adjacent to him can deal damage. Which, since that's who he buffs anyway, that's not a bad thing. 1 to 2 Drow Rangers will also spawn with each wave, not dropping gold or counting toward quest progression. Really, there's nothing at all to worry about here, other than the fact you don't get to use Briv. In his second, he is also movable, but not removable, but here, you'll only be able to use core champions, and those who are not a standard race. So, core champions and those who qualify for Unorthodox Alliance. Newer accounts will probably have a bit of trouble getting a deep push out of this one. The third makes Kalix forced in the formation, and you cannot move him. Here, only Kalix and the most represented race in the formation can deal damage. So make sure your damage dealer's race is the most represented. Also, 1 to 2 Astral Elf Warriors spawn with each wave and attack twice as fast as normal enemies. Ultimately, not too bad here. Now let's talk about availability. Kalix is naturally available for every Day 1 Trials restriction, and all but Zariel for patrons. However, he does have a feat attainable from event rewards that will make him available for Zariel as well. Great availability. So, we have a support with pre-stack buffing potential, but restrictive, but great availability, but a competitive seat. Sharing that Briv and Valentine spot will always be a struggle. But if you don't want to use him, your main formation can benefit from him being in a background party, the first of its kind in that mechanic in this game. There's also an argument to be made for trying to build around Kalix, trying to make Eshara great again, focusing on potpourri and exotic to match up with what Kalix and Ash both want. It's very restrictive, but when you line it all up, Kalix pumps some great numbers, while Eshara will maintain a 4 out of 4 for her bonds. In this case right here, I'm using Freely's Fairy feat and Strongheart's Dragonborn feat, so they'll count. That being said, I personally wouldn't recommend doing that. These days she's outclassed as a DPS, and her availability has always bogged her down, especially in current idle champions. Still, Kalix will pump decent numbers, even in my own cast formation, and being evil, he fits right in with that type of formation. Of course, then the argument becomes Valentine versus Kalix, and Valentine tends to win out. But with my cast formation as an example, she doesn't offer quite as much to cast as other Valentine formations, and he can be competitive if you like him. But of course, he could always be in the background party and still give a little buff to your main formation as well. If I'm being honest, I'm seeing him being in the background or being pulled in to force spawn his favorite foes. But if you want to use him, he can be a great buffer. And you know what? I'm getting a bit tired of always using Valentine. Maybe it's time to shake things up. And honestly, with my cast formation, Kalix will actually pump better numbers than Valentine. In the end, overall useful to have in your roster of champions. Solid champion. A tier. As far as this event's roster and who you might want to focus on for those slots, we've got a lot of up and down here. We've got Birdsong, who actually is an excellent buffer, a prime character for an Artemis team, and just overall pretty good. K'thriss is a big no. At this point, there is pretty much no reason to use him unless you are out of every other option. And the same goes for Paulton. Although Paulton does have a minor use in Goldfind, but especially with the introduction of new Goldfinders in Seed 4, that has kinda died out. There's Havilar, who with Mahen's rework might see a little more use, and there's a chance we'll see a Havilar/Farida rework, but there's no guarantee on that. A huge recommendation right out of the gate for me is Human, however. If you haven't speed capped his speed item, do so now, if you have the capability. Then there is Vi, who can reach excellent numbers, but it's not necessarily tied to her gear. Someone else to mention for that same reason is Karlak, who is herself very good. but she scales with Zariel completions. That's the biggest way to scale her damage, not her equipment. Of course, if you actively use someone, you're gonna want to boost their equipment a little bit, but unlike a lot of people from the absolute adversaries, Karlach does not scale prestacatively with Ceramorphosis or anything like that. Presto's a little over mediocre for me. He does scale a bit better with equipment, but he doesn't see a ton of use. But we are seeing more of a focus on the Saturday morning squad, so there is potential. Thanks for popping in and checking this video out. Let me know what you think about Kalix in the comments. Hit that sub, like, and bell for me. Join the Tyredack community Discord to stay up to date on all things Tyredack, and check me out on Twitch if you have the time. But more importantly than any of that, have a hell of a time out there, champion.